Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Goeglein, and thank you for joining us today for this segment of Serving Your Success. With me, again, thankfully, is Andrew Matthews, and we'll get to chat a little bit about where Andrew is in his process right now with your company, and a new addition to our group as far as on camera, Tiara. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Tiara Johnson. I am from Michigan, and I am here to talk about
whatever I want to talk about.
Whatever I want to talk about, right?
Love it.
As you know, what I do is try and gather around me those multi-generational. Right now we're focusing on the conversations that happen, particularly in how it impacts work and growing businesses with millennials, how boomers and millennials working together, and the types of different lenses that we see the world through. And today, the topic is going to be political correctness and the impact of political correctness on the workplace, on having businesses, what it's like. I'm probably the one who has been alive long enough for the origin of political correctness, and I'll be one of the people who says out loud that I wasn't happy with it then, and I'd even declare at this moment I am less happy with the concept of political correctness than I was even back there. But before you get angry at me, let me just say that the reason I have a challenge with political correctness is that I establish a very high standard for respect in language on how we speak to each other. And I use a criteria that basically says that when you have a conversation with someone, no shame, no blame, no rationalization. So right off the bat, you wouldn't be name calling and picking on people and doing a lot of things. So a lot of things that political correctness legislated initially, and then in the broader sense, I had always seen as a way to be in relationship. So I'll just hold that thought and let you know that what we're really talking about is language and how we respect and talk with each other. So it is very clear you are an African American woman.
Yes.
Think of the workplace. Your entire life, political correctness has been in place.
Yes. Yes.
How has it worked for you? How has it not worked for you?
I think it has done some good for me in protecting my, people respecting me and seeing me as a human being and as a intelligent human being.
Right.
And it definitely, going into the, now times, I feel like it's
now
getting
times.
Yeah.
We're just gonna call it the now times.
Yeah, I think it's getting a little out of control. I think
meaning too much political correctness.
Too much political correctness.
Okay.
People are afraid to speak out and voice their opinion.
Right.
Because they'll be ostracized by society and social media. So I think that I'm leaning more towards not really, yeah.
So hold that thought for a moment. Andrew, let everyone know where you were born and initially your reaction to even the topic today of political correctness.
Yeah, so 28 years ago, I was born in a beautiful city called Rio de Janeiro, located in Brazil. And it's quite a tropical place. Love that place. And political correctness in Brazil, it exists, but not like it exists here in the United States. In the United States, it's kind of like overboard. It's too much.
Okay,
and so
again,
yeah.
too much. From the viewpoint of a videographer, a person who helps people get their brand out, a person who helps people tell story on video, are you finding it a problem?
It doesn't show up because of my methodology. I try to communicate with the audience the way they like to be communicated to.
Okay.
So it's like a direct channel into them. It's not really, there's no such thing.
Okay, so such as, his name was Andrew Dice. He is, I believe, still a comedian. Yes.
Andrew Dice Clay. Yeah.
Yes, Andrew Dice Clay. Okay. He was a man who I chose as a young person never to go see. He's probably my peer. Maybe he's slightly older. You know, like, I just he wore me the heck out going to one of his shows. Yet, I remembered growing up on the Don Rickles of the world, who recently passed away this year. And the first time I went to a live Don Rickles show, and because of my husband's association with the casino, they made sure that I wouldn't be offended about things that... And Don took me over the coals, but it was... You knew it was in good humor. I don't get that same feeling. So I think that there is... If you know where your material, what audience is going to, then I guess, you know, the freedom is still there. But I will use the word freedom. I feel as though our freedom to even feel upset and angry and have negative emotions has been so squashed that we're not actually able to express ourselves correctly.
I think when you're able to create intimacy with people that you want to communicate with, political correctness is put aside, because now you're connected with the person, you're invested in the person, and you want that person to be well, right?
Right.
So you learn how to communicate with that person, and so political correctness is now outside of the picture. It's really about now how to bond from that point on.
And I think it goes back to trust. You know, you've established trust.
Right.
But Tiara, you mentioned social media. So here you are on Friday night, and you're hanging out, and you're trusting. And then someone puts out a little tweet. And you're right now working for an organization. You're employed by someone doing a job. What happens if that tweet about something... would your job hold it against you if it was something negative?
What I've been seeing in most cases, yes.
It will?
Yeah, it will. It will have a negative impact on your job.
Yeah, there's quite a few people have lost their jobs because of some, infamous tweets that really went viral, and the whole world saw it. And it's not good.
So how do you correct it? Like, how do we stop that from happening? How do we be respectful and be allowed to trust and feel when this is our new normal? The way we communicate has so many new and different ways. There's private conversations. I think many years ago there were movies about safe rooms, rich people needing safe rooms. I think all human beings are needing a safe room where they can actually say what they really feel without being held accountable. Like, gosh, how do we correct it? How do we manage it better?
That's a tough one. I really don't know exactly how to kind of not be in that position, but I guess I just feel like we should have the right to freedom of speech, and that should be separate from the job. If it's not harming anyone physically, then
so the fact that you understand that your job would most likely hold you accountable is one thing, but you are wishing that they would not. That they allow your private time to be... And I think there have been some cases where if it's really in the private time, but I do know that the viral nature of it is what really gets you.
Twitter is king at like finding one thing and making it just blast out to the world, so the world knows what it's about, right? And you have to be very careful with what you say because of such things. And so it's really about being a centered human being and knowing what you're saying and how far it can go out. There's that famous case with the director at IWC. She was traveling to South Africa.
Oh!
You remember that one?
Oh, yes.
So, like, that's,
Before she landed, all these things had occurred.
During her flight. Oh, my gosh. Right? The whole world knows about her now.
Right.
So, like, life-changing situation.
Give a little more details just to fill that in.
I don't recall exactly what her... Exactly.
I forget what she tweeted about. But she was on a 10-hour flight, and from the time she left and made the very offhand, like, I believe, if I remember correctly, if she had given a little more thought to the fact she was making a statement publicly, maybe
Yeah.
she wouldn't have done it. It was more, and it wasn't, as malicious. There wasn't malicious intent, but by the time she landed, it was all over.
And she's tied to this huge company, IWC. IWC probably loved to have her as an employee or as a partner, whatever her situation was. But I mean, they cannot connect with that message that she put out. So it put her career in danger.
Right. Now, on the other side, the feeling protected by it, what do you think it has shielded you from?
Definitely people's bigotry and racism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is doing its job in that regard.
Yeah, because and even sexism and so I mean it does have some good in it, but I think now it's just being a little too. It's just too much.
Okay, so now I'm going to put you really in an awkward position. How many times have you looked at someone who looks exactly like me and really thought or projected out something negative because of other people who look just like me doing or having said something?
I've never really had that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a diverse community. So, I look at people as individuals and I judge them based on, how they, present themselves and, and if they show me respect, I show them respect.
And have you been in a situation in the workplace where someone crossed the line negatively?
Oh, definitely.
And what do you do?
Well, it depends on, back then, the old me, I would have a reaction that wasn't, it wasn't constructive.
You met the comment with a reaction.
They were. Yeah, I met them where they were.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fair, though.
Yeah. But I've learned over time as I gotten older that everything doesn't deserve a reaction, and sometimes, you have to take the high road.
Well, I think that whole, I was taught the hard way when I first started learning about behaviors, that you don't want people to respond to your behavior. You want them to be able to respond to actually your thinking process and the good contributions. So using silence when someone has done something crazy actually sets them down a road to go slightly even crazier, because you are not reacting, and it's an incredibly powerful position to be in. However, not having a way, like, I feel sometimes that we have these mass statements that are put out and someone gets slaughtered because of it, one way or the other, but we don't seem to yet have that safe path where, hey, you just did or said something that is really not going to sit with me well.
It's a really weird situation when you're put in that place, but I think you have to be the stronger person when it comes to facing an ignorant person lashing out at you, and when you show that strong example.
I call it lack of emotional maturity. Someone's lack of emotional maturity.
I like that.
Yeah,
well put.
Like that too.
I think you're setting the example for not only yourself but other people to follow suit and be the stronger person in that situation.
Okay. Now, not being born in the United States, have you faced any prejudice just from that? You've come in pretty late into our country.
No, not at all. Even though I'm Latino, right? I'm Brazilian. My dad's American, so I guess I look American.
Okay.
White American, if
Whatever
you will.
an American person. Will someone please tell me what an American looks like?
Yeah, very diverse.
Very diverse.
No,
Didn't put
I'm
that
going to
well.
tell you, I am going to tell a story on myself that, I do not pretend not to be prejudiced. I don't pretend that I've never said any of these things wrong. I really do struggle. My joke about myself is I see stupid, I call it stupid. And I had to learn to do that differently. Honest to goodness, I had to learn to do that differently. But a few years ago, like around 2007, I was in a part of Spain and truly for the first time started seeing large populations of African-born Africans. So their skin color was dramatically different than who I was used to in the United States as who African Americans are. And I remembered at first being slightly like, oh my goodness, that isn't familiar to me. And I remembered so distinctly coming back into John F. Kennedy Airport and seeing a uniformed, you know, whether they were Customs or TSA, African American, and I felt so relieved. It was like, oh, you know, now I know I'm home. And I really worked with that whole way that something, I remembered how distinctly, you know, surprised I was at how the person looked. And then I remembered very distinctly seeing that man in his uniform at JFK saying, wow, I feel comfortable. You know, it was such a different thing. And it was, you know, they were all just people.
Yeah.
You know, there was a little issue in the south of Spain where I was, where the people I was seeing were glad handlers they were selling a lot of stuff on the street, and you were told to stay away from them. So there was a little bit of yah-yah around it. But it was an appreciation for me of how quickly thoughts pop into your head. And if they start popping out your mouth, yeah, there can be a real problem.
Yeah.
So the ideal work environment today around political correctness, what does it look like?
For if I wanted to just say how I would see it, I would keep social media and everything separate. People's personal, you know, lives, as long as
I don't think we're going to get away with that.
Yeah, probably not, but, you know.
We find out things that people say that we just did not want to know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I wouldn't want to know all that, you know.
Right.
You know, I just see it as, you know, people being able to work for the company and do their job, and their personal life is, you know, their personal
If you could improve one thing around political correctness, what do you think it would be?
I would stop, you know, censoring people and what they can say and what they can feel.
Because isn't censoring another form of judgment? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to pick on you because you used the term ignorant when I made the joke about, you know, emotionally mature. Everyone who knows me knows my brain would never just immediately go to emotionally immature as the statement. I would most likely have gone there. That's the truth. However, I appreciate that our brains go there. And when they go there, we are in that second judging as deeply as we don't want to be judged.
Hypocrite.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
To me, I say human. And I think that's the part we've taken out of these interactions. When we legislated political correctness versus taught respect. When we legislated political correctness, instead of allowing me to face my fears when different people of different ways of being, different ways of looking came in, and I honestly didn't understand what I was seeing.
Right.
It would have been better to have conversations. You could have taught me how everyone is the same in these ways. Maybe they're just a little, these ways, ooh, these ways, those ways. Maybe then there's just these other things that we have to pay attention to allow the person their identity. I think that for me, that's been the harm. It's been the crushing down of language to a point where we're not teaching ourselves what is a respectful way. I am afraid of this when I see it. I think this when someone behaves that way. Like, censoring our own brains that much, I don't think is a good...
It becomes quite robotic, right? Like, are you being yourself, or are you trying to be someone that you...
We are not artificial intelligence yet. And in a way, I think that was, for me, the crux of what legislating political correctness did from a damaging standpoint. It stopped teaching me how to hold my feelings, because I was really... was still of the generation where we weren't allowed to have feelings until we were about 40 years old, and then we had to discover the feelings. Well, when we started teaching children that they had feelings, we truncated it too much. We had the right feelings they were allowed to have. And then if they had feelings towards someone else that was different than that, that was bad, instead of teaching them a way to see why it's, maybe you have that feeling, but you can resolve it.
And just by being a human being and conversing with the person and figuring out what's going on, right? It's as simple as that, but we convolute our brains to think it's not that easy, it's complicated, and you don't even have the conversation to start with.
I think tone has a lot to do with it. I think you really, when someone can say something, and I do this in workshops from time to time. I remembered saying, pretend there's a little dog in the room, and you say, "Come here, sweetie, come here, sweetie." And of course, the dog's going to come. But if you can say, you could scream at the top of your lungs, "Come here, sweetie, come here, sweetie," the dog is not going to come.
Right.
Okay, we kind of know. We can sense that something's wrong here. So it's not just about the words we use, but how we use them when we're talking about it.
You're able to sense if the person's being aggressive or not, if they mean well, and if there's good intent, you're more open for a vivid conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
How would you improve the situation? If you had a magic wand and through your work you could make things better, what would it look like?
I would stop paying attention to the exterior narrative of there being, political correctness. I guess the story in the United States, from my opinion, is a racial thing. It's like white black. In Brazil, it's about poor rich. It's a classism type of thing, and so that's their narrative.
Okay.
And I'm sure that several other countries around the world have their own narrative. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings interacting with each other, and that is like what we have in mutual. Like that's the same for everyone. So let's be human with each other first before anything else, right? That's I feel. And
I think that probably gets to that same thing: no shame, no blame, no rationalization. Because I never took our political correctness as only racial. It went along gender lines. It went along ages. I mean, every ism had its own place in the political and legal system where it entered into that political correctness. So that's but when it is just a narrative about economics,
it's different, right?
It really is different.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works in Brazil.
Yeah.
So
and do you find it to be that way today, your experience?
In Brazil? Or?
Yeah, 10 years later, is it?
And so I've been living in the United States since 2008, and I visit it every so often, and it hasn't changed, right? What has changed, I have to say, is that politicians are now more pressured to be politically correct when speaking, because they have strong influence over the masses, and a lot of them, like a majority of male and female, they're like, what's this political correctness thing? I'm not going to change. No way. I'm going to speak the way I want to speak, and that's it. And I can give you some vivid examples, but I don't know if it's appropriate for the show.
Sure.
But it's just
just give one for fun.
This was very recent, but I only saw male politicians say this one. But there was this rebellion inside of a prison in the north of Brazil, in the Amazon region, in Manaus, which is the capital of the Amazon. These people that were in prison fled.
I can see your brain is really trying to do this as politically correct as you can.
I try to remember the situation also.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And so there's I think 40 to 50 prisoners fleeing, and some of them were shot down because I guess that's how they do it. Right. And politicians literally said on national TV, "Man, these guys are thieves. They're murderers. They deserve to be put down."
A little bit like the Philippine president.
Exactly. Yes, and I don't see that ever happening in the United States. I mean, that would be insane, right? That would be very bad press.
That you deserve to die that way.
Right. And so it's interesting how people make decisions on live camera depending on which country they live in.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I brought this topic up because we are all being called to think differently, speak differently, behave differently. One, because of social media. Two, because of the changing nature of employment. And taking responsibility at the end of the day on how we engage with the people in our lives. and how can we improve relationships versus use laws to try and teach us? Like, how do we teach each other to treat each other better? Always remember, one of the tenets of positive psychology is that people matter. And I want to thank you both for being with me today, and thank you for joining our conversation.